So we've made it this far, and in this video, in this chapter, I'm going to start working on the eye. Now, I thought I would take a little bit of a departure from texturing just for this one video, and I would go ahead and model the actual eye. Now, the reason why I'm going to remodel the eye is because, quite frankly, how do I say this? This is just a little too primitive. This is not going to work when I go ahead and export my eyeball to another application. It's just not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to rebuild the eye. How am I going to do that? Well, first of all, I'm going to need a sphere. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just click on this. I'm going to click on Sphere 3D. And I'm going to make it into a Polymesh 3D. Now, before I do anything, before I do any kind of sculpting and anything else, I want to make sure that I change my material to something that has, gives me a good idea of the actual shape of this model. I can see, any detail that I would otherwise sculpt on this piece. And once we have this, I'm just going to go ahead and just subdivide it once. I need a little bit more detail than what I was given originally. And now you're asking yourself, why am I making a new eyeball? Well, the reason why I'm going to make a new eyeball is if we go back over to the previous model, the actual model that I'm sculpting on, and I go ahead and just go to solo while having the eyeballs selected, you'll notice that, of course, the pole of the sphere is not at the center of the pupil. Here you have, if I turn off the polyframe, you'll notice that the pupil is here, and the artifact that happens here as a result of, basically this is where the pole of the sphere is. They're not aligned, and at the same time, the eye doesn't exactly protrude this way. It doesn't stick out this way. The shape is very different. So if I was going to go ahead and texture it and then shade it and, do all that fancy stuff and, render it, it would just appear wrong. It would appear just, I don't know. Like I honestly didn't really like the results. So I'm going to go ahead and just reconstruct the eye. I'm going to make something a little bit better. So back to our sphere. Now that we know why we're making a new eyeball, I'm going to look at this polyframe, and I notice that the, pole of this sphere is over here. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it off. Now, next up, I'm actually going to want to do something to this. I'm going to want to model it. Well, I could do that a few ways. One of them is if I go back and turn on, just go to my brush menu and I go ahead and just choose standard. There's a few ways that I could actually draw the actual iris in. One of them is, of course, if I could just press, Alt and just start sculpting. I mean, I could do it this way. And I could try, but it's not going to be very even. Another method, of course, would be for me to go ahead and just make sure I change my stroke to drag rectangle. And I could draw right from the center. Maybe press and hold Alt as I do that. Of course, I probably would need a more intense Z intensity. So let's go ahead and just, try that. That's another method, maybe smooth it afterwards. But again, I don't really like that approach, to be honest. I mean, yes, I could probably place one of these in with maybe a bit of a smaller Z intensity. Just place this and use this as almost like a guide. But I really want to just use the sculpting tools, like, just the regular stroke and, this method of working. But I want to make it more accurate. I don't want to leave, these kind of lumps and unevenness to my actual drawing of my circle. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to go ahead and just minimize the tool palette for now. I'm going to go into transform, and I'm going to just drag and drop it in here to, show you exactly what is it that I'm going to do. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and just activate symmetry. And let's see what this does. Well, we have now symmetry. And now if I try to do this, you'll notice that I only have to really draw on half the side to get, somewhat of a circle. So it makes it a little bit more accurate than having to, do it on my own like that. But what if if you notice, there's 2 points now and I'm getting more accurate. Well, what if I was to add more points? If I go ahead and just add radial symmetry like this, and then I go ahead and I start drawing outwards, you start noticing that I'm getting a perfect circle. All these points are being drawn out. They're being spaced out radially. If I add more points, I can draw perfect circles. Well, let's change this axis of symmetry because right now there's a problem. My axis of symmetry is here, but my pole is in here. So I, of course, have to go into my z-axis, turn off my x, and now my circle is aligned to the pole. Perfect. Let's go ahead and just turn off the polyframe right now because I don't really need it. And let's go ahead and just shrink the draw size a little bit. And let's try to, oh, I don't know, just start drawing the actual eye. Okay, now I'm working my way inwards over here. Of course, there's a little problem. Right now, this is kind of looking uneven and kind of ugly. So let's add more radial count points. And let's see what happens. Of course, this is a lot more even, a lot nicer. And I could probably work with this. Now, of course, again, the problem is right now is that I guess, when I'm drawing, I'm still getting kind of, I can see every single one of my brushes and every single one of those strokes. I don't want that. What I want is I want a smoother result. Well, that's very easy. I could just press Shift and smooth across all of it. This is exactly what I'm aiming for. Now, if I keep cutting into the surface, you'll notice that, the pupil is getting defined in here. You have the pupil, you have the iris. And yeah, this is pretty much what I was looking for this entire time. So that's pretty much one way to handle an eye. Okay, I guess there's a few things I still want to do. I guess I'm just going to cut into this a little bit more. I'll keep smoothing. Of course, when I'm smoothing, the initial smooth is really too much. Z intensity of 100 is a bit much, so I'm just going to lower that value. And of course, if you notice that you're smoothing too much of a radius, then just lower your brush size. And at least you'll get a much more accurate kind of smooth that way. So just keep working at it until you get something that you like that. All right, perfect. Next up, I want to go ahead and just flatten this plane here. So the way I'm going to do that is, of course, by I'm going to change my brush, so I'm going to go into the brush menu. I'm going to go to Trim Dynamic, increase my brush a little bit, and go over that right there. Now, before I go any further in the sculpting process, I'm going to go ahead and just, first of all, I'm probably going to get rid of the transform panel for now. I'm going to go back into my tool panel. I really don't need the subtool panel yet. I'm just going to go into geometry and subdivide once more. And now that I've subdivided it, I'm going to go ahead and smooth until I get, just a clean result. Okay, so we have this. We have the overall eyeball, we have the iris and the pupil, and the shape has been sort of defined. I kind of like it. Now let's go back in and actually make the outside part of the eye, the glass part of the eye, or, the transparent part. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose another Sphere 3D. I'm going to then go into, Polymesh 3D. Let's do that. Now let's go into the subtool menu and let's add the other part of the eye that we just drew. I'm going to go ahead and go to Append, and pick Polymesh 3D Sphere, And of course, when I go to click Transparent, you'll notice that that object is in fact underneath, exactly as I intended it to be. But, eyeballs aren't exactly perfectly spherical, first of all. They kind of have this bump right out here. So I'm going to have to sculpt that. And I'm going to take the exact same steps that I did when I was sculpting this. I'm going to go back into my transform. I'm going to activate symmetry on the Z, radial symmetry, up my radial count a little bit here. And just go to this view here and just start bumping it out, of course. Like that. Of course, right now, I'm in my Z sub, so that's not going to work. Let me go to Z add. And let me go ahead and just increase the brush size here. And let me just go over the model. ever so slightly. Let me just bump out like that. And of course I'm going to smooth just a little bit. And of course I really don't want this part to go inwards into the actual eye, into the other object. So first of all, I'm going to scale this sphere just a tiny bit. So I'm going to go into deformation. And under deformation, you'll notice that there's a size. So I can actually increase the sphere by a little bit. And that will probably do. Or you know what? I'm actually going to increase it by just a tiny bit more. So let's see how much it's going to work. If I go to 5, that's too much. If I go to 3, that's about perfect. So you know what? I'm going to just type in number 3, because by the time I get to 3 and I let go, by the time I let go, the slider could move a little bit more. So I'm just going to type in 3 and press enter. So I have these two parts for my eyeball. I think that's going to more or less work. Might have to edit the shape a little bit more. Again, smooth will really help. And now I have two parts for this eyeball. What's next? Well, the next part is, first of all, I'm going to probably combine all of this, but I'm going to do it after I do a little bit of texturing. Now, I know that I promised that I would use Photoshop and I would start talking about ZBrush, but you know what? Before I do that, I thought I would just go into Polypaint a little bit more. And there's really not much more that I really need to talk about, but I thought I'd just go into a cool method of, painting this eye. Well, considering I'm still on topic of this, transform, activate symmetry, and radial count, we can actually use this to our benefit, especially when dealing with this eyeball here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just choose a color. I'm going to fill in, just a slight gray color, nothing too strong. If I go ahead and just change my material to flat gray, okay, this is the color that we're working with. Just remember that when you're using the matte cap gray and you choose a gray color, there's a little bit of multiplication, so it actually appears darker than it actually is. Of course, I'm going to have to change my brush to standard, because right now what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to paint. So go into your usual paint settings, standard stroke, dots, standard brush, RGB, and just pick a color, whatever color. And I'm going to go ahead and just make sure, again, when I'm in RGB mode, I'm going to paint over this entire piece like that, and that is perfect. So now let's go ahead and just pick a different color. I'm going to pick something, I guess like that. I'm going to paint on this eyeball here. And of course I'm going to choose a slightly bigger brush and just very gently work my way inwards like that. Now I guess I could have changed or used a different color for this eyeball altogether, just something that maybe was a lot more gray and maybe had just a tiny tint of, pink for the rest of this eye. I don't know yet. I could very easily do something like that. Guess that could work. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and just use the, I don't know, maybe I'll just use the green, some kind of green, I'm not really sure yet, but I'll use something random to just fill this in. Then of course I'm going to use the black to paint in the inside of this eye. And this is where it starts getting neat, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and first of all I can use the smooth brush to, well, first of all I should undo that. And the reason why I'm going to undo that is because when I use the smooth brush initially, you'll notice that the Z add button is on. I'm going to turn that off. I'm just going to blur, paint, blur, and paint and blur. Of course, if I've made too much of this gray part here, I'm just going to sample it on the outside color here, or inside the iris, paint outwards, again blur, paint, copy here, and just work like that. Okay, so the result that we have so far is like this. That's not bad. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just blur some of this as well. Like that. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Next part, I'm going to click on here. And, oh, actually, I'm not even going to click. I'm just basically going to hover over this part, press C. I'm going to choose a slightly lighter color. And that's not what I was looking for. What I really wanted to do is I wanted to click on here. I wanted to then press space and just choose, first of all, I wanted to choose a slightly lighter color and maybe a little bit desaturated. I just wanted to choose something that was still greenish but had a little bit of white in it. Of course, I can keep going. I can keep picking lighter colors. Just keep drawing over that area. Like that. Okay, so we have kind of an, an eyeball, I guess. But it's not perfect yet. Well, one thing I'm going to do now is, considering I'm painting on this object, I might as well just subdivide the sphere a little bit further. Because 131,000 polygons, it really isn't enough. So I'm just going to subdivide it once. And let's see how much detail we actually get with this. Now, if I paint something like that, that'll work. If I choose a slightly smaller draw size, and I start drawing, you'll notice that, I'm getting more detail. I like the fact that I'm getting more detail, but is it really enough for an eyeball? Well, if I'm just going to view up my character from about this distance, that'll work. If I start getting in closer, that's not going to work. And I guess for now, I kind of want more detail on this guy. So I'm just going to subdivide it just once more. I think I actually ended up undoing. But anyways, okay. So let's make me pick a smaller radius. And you know what? That's actually not too bad, I guess. Might as well just keep that. So let's go ahead and just choose the black here. Maybe even choose the RGB intensity to be a little bit lower for my brush. Of course, I'm going to just, make a kind of like a radial movement here as I work across the surface. And again, I could just increase it, smooth it out, and just keep working on this eye like this. Now, it's not exactly the perfect eye. I don't claim it to be. But, we just keep working until we get something right. Or at least something a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and just try to find my transform panel again. And you know what? For this case, I'm going to go ahead and just open this menu up here. And I'm going to just drag the transform panel over to here. Just because that way, at the very least, I get this radial symmetry count just on the side, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and just, when you're painting these eyes, by the way, you could just increase the number to whatever you want. Just work with the value that you currently have. And of course, when you want to add some variation to it, because right now it looks, very symmetrical, very radial, very calculated, you could always just change the radial count to something lower. Add some, details like that. And then maybe change the radial count again to something like that. Just keep changing it up so that it doesn't appear like you have any symmetry. Even though, you might. And at the very end, when you're actually done drawing the eyeball, when you're pretty much done, you could, of course, just get rid of radial symmetry altogether. And I don't know. Just, get rid of radial symmetry at the end, at the very end. Paint in some details manually. Try to get rid of that last little bit of symmetry that might be visible and very obvious in your model. But for the most part, You know, this is one way of handling eyeballs in ZBrush. Like that. Okay, so we have this eyeball here. And again, it's not perfect. I could always change it up in Photoshop. And of course, I could use things like Projection Master to start painting in the veins, or maybe not even. You know, I don't really need it. I mean, I could just go ahead and just delete or get rid of symmetry. I could sample a color off of here. Maybe I might want to make it a little bit more intense and just maybe draw in my veins. You know, just manually. Like that. But, you know, at the very least, I can use Polypaint and a bunch of other tricks to paint in eyeballs. Of course, in order to make it look like an actual eyeball with all the reflection and everything, more or less, I mean, there's still limitations within ZBrush. What I could do is, of course, I could just go ahead and just select this eye here. I could make this. I could just click on this button here. I could then, of course, paint a material for this object. So I'm going to choose something shiny. I'm going to change the material to, I don't know, maybe silver foil bright. And you know, it applied the material globally, but what if I was to go ahead and just paint the actual material onto this object? So we have that. And you know what? When I render this object, I don't want it to be as faceted, so I'm just going to go into geometry, subdivide the model a tiny bit. So now we have this, we have our eyeball, which of course I don't want this material to be applied to this eyeball. What I want is I just want to choose a regular, I don't know, maybe sketch shaded 2 material, or I don't know, something. So we have this and we have that, and of course I really should turn off transparent ghost. So anyways, I have this eye here and I have the outside. Well, how do I make the actual, you know, this part transparent? Well, first of all, I have to click on this button here. And then I have to go into render. I have to make sure that my transparency is on. And in here I have all the settings for that. So let's just go ahead and just click BPR and let's see what we get. Okay, so we have the outside that's transparent, but of course it's, you know, it's killing the color for the inside here and it's not really working. So let's go ahead and just click on render again. Let's change a few of the settings in the transparency here. I'm going to first of all make sure that the color is not affected. Color intensity factor, I'm just going to lower that as well, just, you know, it's something very small. Refraction, I pretty much want to get rid of that as well. You know what, let's try to render now. Let's see what we get. Well, that's better. I'm starting to see a little bit more color. So let's get back into the render menu. Maybe I want to lower this factor here, maybe even get rid of this one here, and try it again. Even better. You know, now I have this nice little shine across the middle here, and I don't know, it's working a little bit better. It's not perfect, obviously, but you know, it is what it is for now. You know, I could obviously keep working on it. And of course I could just get rid of the strength. Let's see what happens when I get rid of make the strength smaller. What happens then? Of course you know, that object becomes more opaque. And of course if I go ahead and make the N factor 0, I get nothing. So I don't want nothing, I want something like that. Of course, just press this, and you got the outside of the eyeball. And of course you get, you know, the part inside. So at the very least for now, I have the actual objects for my eyeballs. What I didn't get so far is, however, you know, this will not be my final eye, but at the very least I could export this to any of my external applications, and I could use this very easily for, you know, the final result. And you know what? Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to merge all this together, and I'm going to place it into my, you know, into my character. So the next step is, of course, for me to just go ahead and just select this, go merge down. But of course, before I do merge down, I really want to make sure that this object and this object have the same subdivision level. You don't know why yet, but I'll show you in a sec. I'm going to go down here, and the subdivision is level 4. I'm going to select this tool, and this object is level 4 as well. This is really important, because if I now merge down, if I go to merge visible or anything, and you know what, I'm just going to go and make sure weld is turned off. I'm going to merge visible. Reason why I did this, and of course my merged object is here. The reason why I did this is that now I have two objects, one within the other, that are completely merged. The reason why I wanted to merge it is because now I can move both these parts as separate pieces. So let's go ahead and just go into my character here. And let's append these new eyes. Merged. Right now they're big. That's not a problem. I'm going to turn off everything except these old eyes. And I'm going to enable the new ones. Of course, at the same time, I'm going to turn off my perspective just because I don't want any perspective to get in the way right now. I don't really need geometry right now. I'm just going to turn it off. And I'm going to also want to make sure that my new eyeballs are selected because I will be making them smaller. Go down into deformation and go ahead and just use the size and size it down until, it's just small enough. Now, of course, you notice that these eyeballs are not visible, so just make sure that the old eyeballs and the new eyeballs are visible, and you're working on the new eyeballs right now. Okay, so next step, of course, is for me to go into move, use transpose or anything else. Make sure you're maybe in transparency mode even. It's up to you. Go back to size. Size it up a bit. And just make sure that this eyeball is a tiny little bit bigger than the old one. Or maybe even exactly the same size. If it's a tiny bit bigger by maybe like, a millimeter here or there, it probably won't break anything really. I mean, obviously the more accurate you are with this, the better. And of course, just place it in this way. So on this axis it's placed. Of course, if I go here, it's not. So next stage for me is to just go ahead and just move it over. And you notice that I'm moving it to the left eye and not the right one. Of course, the reason for that is because I'm going to be mirroring this later. And mirror works from left to right, as in from the negative x to the positive x. So let's move it over like that. And now, of course, I need to rotate the center of the eye, that bulge. I have to make sure that it is in the center of this right here. Of course, right now I don't see that, so I'm just going to go into polyframe and I'm going to make sure I align this line with that right there. And that's more or less there. Do I need it to be perfect? Not right now. Okay, so I have the new eye and the old eye. And for now, that's okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and just, before I do any kind of mirroring, I'm going to see how the new eye looks on with the character displayed. I'm going to hide the old eye. There's a little bit of a problem right now. And that is that right now I don't actually see the real eye. All I see is just the, this part here, and it's kind of confusing to be able to tell exactly what I'm seeing. So I'm going to want to hide this part, and I'm going to want to see this. Of course, you start noticing that. Well, there you go. And does this look okay? I think it looks fine. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to mirror this over to the other side. And you know what? I'm going to unhide everything. I'm going to rotate this entire eyeball just slightly from the center. I have to rotate it slightly to like that. And now I'm going to see how it looks in here. I'm still not sure if it's better, but whatever. Anyways, the reason why I wanted to merge this eye is just so that I could move the entire piece as one piece, right? So when I moved it, scaled it, you know, it worked as one unit. But now there's a problem, because now the outside and the inside, I think they're going to be, well, let me do a test. Let me do a render BPR, because I've never actually merged and rendered after that the fact with transparency on. And of course, as you can see, this is not being transparent to the object below. And that's of course bad. So I'm going to want to separate now this top of the eye, the glass part, from the other part of the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on here. I'm going to separate it. I'm going to make sure I go to split hidden. So I'm going to split a hidden. Now you can see that this part of the eye and that part are different. So I have this object and that one. And of course, now I'm just going to make sure that this is set to that. And let's see what happens when I go ahead and render my object. So let's choose let's go ahead and just choose BPR. And that's not quite what I expected. Of course, this part's hidden. So let me go ahead and just choose BPR again. So the inside of the eye is now visible. And anyways, you have the eye. Let's see if the other part's still visible or not. Let's hope it is. And yeah, it's there. As you can see, if I go ahead and hide that, or nope. Well, first of all, let me just hide the old eyes. Let me go down in here. Let me hide this. You'll notice that we see only a very little part of the eye. Unless, of course, I have that visible. So we have this entire shape here. Basically, there's a little bit of refraction happening. So the iris is getting refracted onto the, onto the glass part of the eye. So anyways, now what we can do is, of course, we can just go ahead and just mirror all of this out. So let's go ahead and just use mirror and weld. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and just use the reconstruction. Actually not, I guess I shouldn't use reconstruction just yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and just mirror and weld. Now we have two eyes. I'm going to go ahead and go here. Mirror and weld once again. And now let's try to use reconstruction. And yeah, there's a little bit of a problem. I don't know why, but usually when you're doing things like merging layers and mirror and welding and doing all that stuff, usually reconstruction will fail somewhere along the lines. But anyways, usually what you want to do is you want to make sure that all your subdivision levels are perfect. And I think what might have happened is when I split hidden, I think that's when, something might have been added or changed in the actual geometry, so it doesn't do it. I don't know exactly what's wrong, but anyways, usually that's what you need to do in order to get your reconstruct subdivision to actually work again. The other thing, of course, you need UV maps, and right now it seems like it's got them. So I don't think that's the issue here. Or it actually might be, I don't know. Anyways, let's try to render it. If I find the exact issue with the, reconstruct subdiv, I'll make a free chapter for it. I'll release it a little bit later, but for now, let's just leave it as is. So anyways, we have the eyes kind of done. The only thing I really need to do is I just need to paint in the veins and stuff. But at the very least, I have the eyes started. They look a lot better than what I had previously. I think these ones will work just overall better. Now, of course, I could go into Photoshop and paint them however I want. I could add the veins and, everything else that I might want to add to these eyes. So for now, I don't really need the glass part, so I'm just going to go ahead and just keep that hidden. Of course, this was already selected, so I might as well just select this part of the eye. Just hide that because I don't really need it. And the old eyes, well, I'm just going to delete them. Like that. I think these eyes that I have right now are a lot better. And of course, as far as the model goes, I'm going to go ahead and just choose a different sketch shaded. Might even go into here and just increase the cavity detection. Go into the second shader, increase the color bump slightly, maybe to around 2. And try to render this guy and see what we get. It's not too bad. Let me just turn on occlusion for 1 sec, just re-render it. Nice. So, in the next chapter, I'm going to keep working on this eye, and I'm going to go ahead and just use the Z app link, or maybe Projection Master. Haven't really decided yet. Anyways, but yeah, that's pretty much how I go about constructing the eye, how I start using the radial symmetry to go ahead and just paint this eyeball and you know, just functions like that. And yeah, in the next chapter, I'm going to go ahead and just start using Projection Master or Photoshop. They're both pretty much the same, to go ahead and just draw in the smaller details, add some variation to this eye, use blend modes and stuff like that to my advantage. So this chapter is done. Cheers.